This guy wanted a front porch, and it was all these features that we just don't do. And I get a long email from him. He's recently found out he's dying of cancer, and he wants to build this for his wife because she's been wanting it forever. How do you say no to that? So we did. It was great. And he did pass, and former policeman, so you want to help all those first responders. And you don't think you're affecting people's lives. So with, I'm building a deck, but wow, it's powerful when that happens.
Great, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is fun. So let's take a minute to get to know one another. I think we've got a great cross section of brands here, backgrounds. Some of you don't know one another. So why don't we start with David? Give us a little bit about your background, David, the brand that you're with, how long you've been in the business, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I started in '04, so I'm in my 22nd season right now. And I look at it that way because it's business owning is a sport, right? And full contact sport, by the way, with clients. Yeah, we've done a great job of growing the business. We now have 2 locations, being in Chicago and Charlotte, North Carolina. And great team we've built and have a lot of fun with it. So, been good.
Clint Cobia with Koala Insulation of Palm Beaches. Been going for 3.5 years, be 4 years in May. So excited. Things have been going really well. Kind of a big curveball getting into the construction industry. I actually had a background in marketing prior to, which was really nice. It's like taking candy from a baby once I got that going. But yeah, it's going really good so far. So
Great.
I'm Justice from Longview, Texas. Been a part of first team for about a little over 3 years. And I have a wife, I have four daughters, and just excited about growing our business.
That's great. Well, I'm Scott Sutton. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Empower. And unlike each of you, I have never owned my own business. I have a passion for entrepreneurialism. My grandfather on my mother's side was an independent waterman that built a company from nothing on the Chesapeake Bay and the York River. My father's father was an independent hotelier, owned his own hotel, was unbranded, known as the Calvin Hotel. So I grew up around folks that were in the community that built businesses. And I started my journey in franchising in 1992. And I'm not trying to date myself. I was in college, all right, at the time. But have found a passion and love for being around and working with folks that take that step, that experience that journey of business ownership. So I'm incredibly humbled and excited to be sitting with each of you to talk about that journey today. So it's great to be here. Greg?
Yeah, I'm Greg. I'm a Bumble Roofing owner in Philadelphia. I live out there with my wife and my 2-year-old daughter. I was the first franchisee to buy into the system, so we're a new brand. We're coming up on almost a year in. My professional background, I was in sales for most of my professional career, mostly medical device. There was a brief gap in there where I sold tech for a venture capital startup. And my job was basically to talk to upcoming general partners all day, every day. And these are people who were mostly former founders who have exited their companies for multi-millions of dollars, and now they're going out to raise money from LPs to invest into other startups. And you talk to these guys day after day, and you think like these are some super brilliant, sophisticated, nuanced people. And what you learn is that they're just like regular guys and girls. And like the only difference is that they just went out and did the thing. You know, they just said, F it, I'm living life on my own terms, and they went out and did it. So I think that's like what really started kicking the tires for me. And it's kind of why I'm sitting here today.
That's great. That's great.
My name's Rick. With Outdoor Lighting Perspectives in Richmond, Virginia. I also have Canopy Lawn Care in Richmond, Virginia. And I have had outdoor lighting perspectives for 7 years, Canopy 14 months. And I retired from corporate life and was informed I needed something to do by my wife. And so in my journey was interesting because I hired a business broker, and I had a ton of things coming across my desk, and lo and behold, I was a client of Outdoor Lighting Perspectives. I had lights on my house, right? And I found out that the owner was selling, and I was like, oh, this could be fun, right? Not knowing anything about landscape lighting, and that's how I began my journey into the franchise system. I had no clue that Outdoor Lighting Perspectives was a franchise when I first started looking at it. I just thought it was a neighborhood lady who sold lights. So it's an interesting journey.
And a good one,
Yeah,
right?
it's been great.
Which is interesting because I think about exploring the why. You've heard today, you've heard before that this is hard. Business ownership is difficult. It has its challenges. Franchising is difficult. It's hard. It has its challenges. And yet, while many people think about business ownership, few actually take that step. And each of you made that decision. And I'm really interested to understand, what was it? What was the catalyst? What was the moment where you made the decision, I want to own my own business and I'm going to make it happen? Rick, let's stay with you on that one.
All right.
What was it? What was the kernel?
You know, I was exiting my career, and I'm not the type of person that can sit around, and I love golf, but I can't do it all day. So I'm not very good at it. So you know, I had to find something. I just thought, I don't really want to do anything corporate because that's where I came from. I was retiring. I was actually collecting my pension, and I thought, well, let's try. What can I do on my own? So I knew I didn't want to do food, and I didn't want to do retail. So that narrowed my search down to service industries, right? So that's kind of that catalyst. Is like I knew I was getting out. Oh boy, what is my next step? Well, gosh, I got a hold of a business broker and started, well, what can I do? I didn't even know what I wanted to do. So, you know, those first steps, those are the scariest steps, I think. I don't know what, you know, my story might be a little different than that, but that was my first scariest step, because being in the corporate world for 28 years, 27 years, just now what do I do and how do I do it, right? I knew, you know, how to run P&Ls and be accountable for so many years, but now I got to do that on my own now. I'm not doing it for somebody else. So that's my journey, or my beginning.
It's fascinating. And Dave, what was it for you? What was that epiphany?
You know, I mean, I would think that spark was always there from the time I was young. I had that in my head that, boy, I want to own my business someday. And when my wife and I first got married, we dabbled. I had a multi-unit property I owned and managed and lived in, which was a good experience. She did some entrepreneurial stuff on her own, but none of it was major, just touches. We both had regular jobs. And I think that one of the sparks was 9/11, actually. It's kind of an interesting pivotal point for me. My second job out of college, I'd been there 9 years, moved up in the company, a lot of management, a lot of sales experience. And I was traveling, and I landed at LaGuardia on 9/11 as everything was happening. And the company just from there started collapsing. And so it was, all right, got to do something new. And got a job, but I wasn't satisfied. And I told my wife, I got to come up with something. And she looked at me and went, I've heard that a few times. Yes, Dave, you go work on that, assuming it would end up every other place. And I started searching, and I did have a passion. My one hobby, never been big on anything but work, but was landscaping and outdoor living, gardening. And I found Architect, and tying that to the multi-unit properties I owned, I did a lot of the work there. So the construction part grabbed me too. So when I looked at those two things and I went, the outdoor living space is hot, it just made a lot of sense. And I'll be honest though, if she didn't push me to say, hey, we can do this and support it, which in hindsight's crazy. We had 2 little kids. My daughter was 4, my son was 2. My wife wasn't working, and she's like, yeah, let's do this. And so we dove in head first, and that got us going.
There's this term called all in.
We were all in.
It sounds a lot like burn the boat.
That's with the boats were burned. Yeah, that's for sure.
That's exactly right. And that resonates with part of the renegade mentality from this morning, which is don't give yourself an out, right? That's a prime example of that. Clint.
I've always had the entrepreneurial bug. I did try my hand at working for other people early on. I kind of came to the realization I wasn't going to hit my life's financial goals or freedom goals going that route. I knew it was going to be a lot harder, and it was. It always has been. This is actually probably the third. It is the third business that I've started from scratch. Told myself I was never going to do it again. I'm buying businesses that are already established at this point. Probably put 5 years worth of work into the first 2 years, but I've got a 4 and a 7-year-old, and I've been able to really successfully step back from the business and spend a lot of time with them, which was one of the main goals from the very beginning. So it's been, an incredible journey with Koala.
It's awesome. Justice.
From an early age, I was really intrigued about business ownership. And my grandparents, they ran a dairy when my mother was growing up. And so the business ownership has kind of been ingrained in my family for decades. And so I didn't start out that way on my journey, but looking back, I've been gaining these tools for years. I went to technical school out of high school. I didn't make great grades in school, and so I was like, this may be it for me. And so I went to technical school, was successful in working on cars, but I knew there was an inroad to that game, and I didn't want to crawl around on the ground for the rest of my life. So a business opportunity came, and I asked a few questions. I took out a huge loan, and I jumped in with both feet. And I owned a mobile tool franchise for 10 years. And so my wife and I always sold that when I was 37 in 2014. And I figured out 2 years later retirement was not for me. And so I tried a couple of different things, but for 10 years we were looking for another business opportunity. One of those I thought had landed in our lap back in 2019. I went to work for a friend of mine that owned a dry cleaners that had been in the community for years, and then COVID hits, and so we put our heads together to figure out how are we going to recover from this. And so the opportunity for us to partner with First Team came up, and I said, hey, I think this is a no-brainer for us to partner with this. And he said, man, you're the general manager, you call the shots, you're looking at buying this company. And so if you think it's a smart move, let's do it. And so we did that, and we grew very, very slowly. And time came for me to make choices on whether to buy the whole operation or not. And, I just didn't have a great feeling about it, but one of the options that was given to me was to take over the First Team franchise. And so I'd been running both companies for 3 years. I'd been running the dry cleaners for 5. And so in January of last year, I promised my wife that we would start the second quarter of the year in a new direction. Did I know what that was at the moment? No. But I made a promise to her, and on March 31st of last year, I put in my resignation to the company and the option to take over First Team solely. And I was scared to death. I mean, I've got 4 kids and everything riding on this. And so I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but, growing up working on a farm, I wasn't afraid of work. And so I went to work, wore any hat that you could think of to run this business, worked, 70, 80 hours a week, whatever it took. And when we set out, my goal was to double our business from 2023. We did that by August, and then we doubled it again by the end of the year.
That's awesome.
Well done. Well done.
It's been fun. It's been hard, but we are building something for our family for years to come.
It's incredible. Great story. Right. Catalyst. What was it?
Yeah, so I touched on this a couple minutes ago, but there was a period of time during my professional career where my job was to talk all day, every day to these former founders who had these massive exits. And like, I'm talking like tens of millions of dollars, and you talk to hundreds of these people. And I think, like, at least I glorified a lot of these tech founders. Like, you see the Zuckerbergs of the world, the Bezos of the world, the Musks of the world, and you glorify them in your head. Like, okay, you can never be those types of guys because they must have this inherent brilliance that you'll never have. And then you talk to these guys and you're like, almost everybody you talk to is just a normal dude. You know what I mean? Like, there's no difference between you and I. I mean, sure, they're smart and they're sophisticated and they've figured out how to get things done over a period of time. But for the most part, they just said, I'm going to go out and do this thing. And that's what they did. And so that really motivated me to start thinking about where my journey was going to go from there. I knew pretty quickly that like starting a tech company wasn't going to be it. I mean, the venture space is wild. They basically just raise all these dollars and dilute themselves into oblivion and run cash burning companies for, you know, a decade or more and just hope that there's an exit at the end of it. To me, like, you know, the home service type of realm was a little bit more reasonable of a short-term and long-term play. But yeah, I think that year and a half that I spent at that startup was a huge catalyst for me.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear the diversity of the story. But what isn't fascinating to me is this concept of being all in, right? Of burning the boats and making that decision, which again is something that I don't think people grasp and really understand when it comes to business ownership. And so I'm curious, as each of you embarked upon that step to business ownership, we all have perceptions, expectations. What was it? What was the one thing that most surprised you about you as you bridged into business ownership? What was the one thing that surprised you about you when the perception became reality? Cliff?
That's a great question.
Putting you on the spot.
But no, I mean, when I really think about it, I think it's the grit, you know, like the amount of work that I had to do in the first year and a half to 2 years of my business was astonishing. And at no point did I second guess myself or even think about it. It was nose to the grindstone, got to get this done, boats are burned, move on, you know, keep going, keep trucking. And it kind of, you know, I was very surprised with my ability to do that, if I'm being totally honest. Yeah.
Well, it had, when you think about, okay, like old Clint, new Clint, right?
Yeah.
Old Clint working for someone else.
Yeah.
You've got an issue you've got to solve, a decision you have to make.
Yeah.
How different was that process from new Clint, who is the decision maker and has to make that decision for the benefit of Clint's company, his employees, his customers? How different was that shift from going from working from someone else for someone else to owning your own business?
A lot more gray hair, but created a lot more gray hair. But I mean, you know, when you the decisions that you make working for someone else, I don't think, you know, carry as much weight. So when you're working for yourself, you have those decisions that are just so important, and a lot of them, some of them aren't as important, and you sometimes put too much weight on those certain decisions. But ultimately, I think it just was. I'm able to make those important decisions a lot faster and not have to think about it as much anymore. That was something I kind of had to train myself.
Do you feel like
quick pivots, quick moves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
I was literally just thinking the same thing. It's like the difference for me is that there is no barrier to any decision. Like, you can make a decision in an instant with conviction, and you can implement that decision immediately. Now, the other difference on the other side of the spectrum is that that decision now carries a lot of personal responsibility, right? So it comes with a little bit more risk. But I'm with you, dude. Like the speed at which you can make decisions and just start to implement and go.
Yeah.
That's what I love the most. It's just trial by fire. Like, let's just try this out, see how it goes, and like keep moving on.
The biggest thing is the amount of time put in to it, right? Which I think anybody looking to do something on their own has that feeling of there's going to be some investment time-wise to it, but it's interesting when you get into it and you realize how much time it is, but again, what you're getting back out of it and what you could provide, right? You know, they say that, you know, you have to put the time into it to get something out of it, right? And if you're not willing to do that, then, you know, what are you doing it for, right? So, you know, I have a wife. I don't have kids, but I have a dog. So, right, we like to do things. So, you know, my thing is, you know, I was retiring, but I needed something to do. But I also just didn't want to go do something that wasn't fulfilling for me. And so that's the catalyst of putting the work in, getting something in return, and watching something grow is the biggest thing.
That's something that I guess I didn't really hit on is like when you do make those difficult decisions and those things do work out, the fulfillment that you get from it, you know, the excitement, and just all of a sudden it's just the greatest feeling, you know, and you don't, you know, working for somebody else, it's cool, but you know, you don't really.
Clint, do you mind?
The same.
I have a question for you if you don't mind. So you said something earlier that really resonated with me, and it probably does for a lot of business ownerships, but you talked about freedom and how like you're 4 or 5 years in or whatever, and you feel like you've attained at least a certain amount of freedom that you didn't have when you started. Sure. So I'm a year in. Yeah. So freedom does not exist. Yeah. I don't necessarily want it to exist right now, but part of why I got into this, I'm married, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and we're hoping to have more kids. And while you want to build something for your family, you also want to build this vehicle that allows you to be there for them and be there for them when you want and when they need. So like the question there is, was there a certain point in time where you felt you could make that switch, or were there any type of systems that you put in place in your own business that helped you get there?
It was definitely system based, but the biggest point in time was really, it was also, you know, driven by revenue. We got to a point to where I could start hiring people that weren't directly related to revenue. So, you know, probably the biggest hire for me was an office person, because I was answering phones in an attic in the middle of doing all this work. You know, when I was able to move that off, have her, you know, help out with emails, that kind of stuff, I was really able to step back. But I mean, I spent in that time, you know, I did spend a lot of time in attics and doing physical work, but the big grind is also, you know, when you get done with that, you still have a whole business you got to run. These systems that you do need to put into place and ultimately make yourself the least important person in the business. You know what I mean? And that was the goal from the beginning. So, you know, yeah, it was about the 2-year mark where I feel like I was able to kind of make that move, you know.
Freedom grabbed me too when you used that word, and I was like, I should have said that when I talked about why I wanted to do it. And I'm gonna to push back a little bit on what you said. You have freedom, but freedom brings responsibility. And because you have responsibility, you don't go, I can just do whatever I want. So you got it. And my journey, I'd use the same message. It was all about building a team, building systems and processes. And I think back to, you know, like my family in the early days going on trips to Disney. And my wife or I are on the phone making prospect calls in the hotel before we take the kids to the park. And we were always on the phone, you know, might be in the middle of the ride and not in the middle of the ride, but in line, getting a call, we had to take it. Today, I got a team, and those things don't happen. We go on a trip, we don't take calls, we don't do any, I mean, unless it's an emergency, but those are rare now. And so it's all about building that team, building those processes, and tying into the surprise or the, what's fun about it is once you do that and your team's hitting goals, wow, is that fulfilling. It's one thing when you hit goals, but when your team's hitting the goals and they're all feeling good, you really know you've done something, you know. And then the freedom, you feel it. You may not feel it now, but you're building it.
And there's a huge difference between business ownership and owner-operator, right? And so and for me, when I stepped into a business, it's here we are today. Here's where I want to be tomorrow. So I have to scale my business for what I want it to be tomorrow, today, right? So if I wanted more freedom, I needed to hire a general manager or somebody or an office manager, office person to offload some of that to allow me to get to that point. But seeing where I wanted to be and then creating that pipeline to get there, or that that road to get to where I wanted to be to scale the business. That's work, but that's gratifying work, right? You're creating something, but you're also providing opportunities for others to do. So you're building something. You're taking something, and you're an actual business owner, right? You're not an owner operator. You're not scooping ice cream, right? Because you got to go make the donuts or something like that. Other people are making the donuts. You're figuring how to open 15 more donut shops or whatever. You're doing that kind of scale, right? So for me, that's a pretty good gratifying part.
I think ultimately freedom is why we all do this. You know, whether that's freedom for time or freedom financially. And so, I mean, that's something that it's been ingrained in me for a long time. I wish I would have had the information I have now when I was in my early 20s.
We all.
Right. And so, you know, financial freedom is one of the reasons why my wife and I do this. And, you know, but also time freedom, because we know that before we know it, our kids will be grown, they'll be gone. And so I remember a couple weeks ago, my wife called me and she said, "Hey, do you think you can leave the office by, you know, 5 or 5:30? I don't remember what time it was specifically." And I said, "You know, what's going on?" And she said, you know, something about an event for one of the girls. And I said, you know, "Hey, if I can't take the time away to do that, why are we doing this?" And so that is something that is extremely important to my family, is time freedom.
How do your families perceive what it is that you do every day? Do they know? You know, I know we've got some youngins that probably don't have a view, right? If they're 2 years old, but
You got to have a cheerleader, and that's what they are, right? Your family's your cheerleaders. Your family's your support system when you're not at the office. Even when you are at the office, right? That not every day's a happy day, right? You call your wife and they're your cheerleader. You go home after a long day and they're your cheerleader. You're at spending time with them at the weekend. They're your cheerleader, right? But they're your support system. That's your family. My family knows what I do, right? And they are 100% my biggest fans, right, for doing it.
Yeah, I think my wife is definitely my biggest supporter. You know, working, 60, 70 hours a week, running dry cleaners in this business, it was stressful on the family. And one of the reasons it was stressful for her was that we were building somebody else's dream. And so, I apologized to her one night because I came home real late and said, "I'm sorry I'm late." And she said, "Hey, it's okay. You're doing this for us." And so, she's been a great supporter and never had anything negative to say about what we're doing, working long hours. My kids, of course, my youngest, she's 6, and she really doesn't grasp. She likes going to daddy's office, seeing all the stuff. But my other 2 older ones, one's 9 and one's 11, and they kind of are grasping some things. And my 9-year-old, she asked, something about what we were doing, and she said, "We're going to get rich." I was like, "Well, maybe we will, maybe we won't, but it's not about getting rich. It's about time. It's about, time with family and financial freedom. And maybe the money that we make can help somebody. It's not all about what we can keep. It's, about what we can give also." And my 11-year-old, she said, "Well, so Dad, you want people's house to catch on fire?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." I mean, absolutely not. I said, "But, regardless, it's going to happen. Somebody's going to have a fire, or somebody's water line's going to bust, and they're going to call us." I was like, "We're there to help them. People need us." And so, at that point, she's grasping more about what we're there to actually do.
I think the portfolio, right, the business orientation is really interesting when we think about the brands that each of you are leading. Yeah, I think about Outdoor Lighting Perspectives and Architect, which is focusing on the beautification and the ability of homeowners to live their best life. And I think about, Dave, what your team builds for those homeowners. That's where they're going to live, laugh, love, connect, meet. At the same time, we have brands that are solving problems, and some of those problems happen and create situations that homeowners are at their lowest, right? When you have a fire, when you have water damage, when you've got a tree limb that falls on the roof of the home, you are there, and in a high integrity, responsible way to solve that problem. When you think about koala insulation and the problem that you're solving, the efficiency, the cost savings, the ability to be comfortable, like, these are important value propositions that each of you are providing to your client. And I'm curious, when you take a step back and you look at the value that your team, the value that you are bringing to the client, give me a story about what has been a profound experience in an interaction with a customer, right? What's been a profoundly impactful interaction with a customer that's helped you understand, hey, I'm making a difference. Like, what we do means something.
Sure.
With all due respect for scooping ice cream, right? That's
Yeah.
important. Creating a memory, right?
That's right.
But who's got a customer example?
I've got a ton of them, and in our biggest. Well, for the most part, people want to uplight the front of their homes, and they're not thinking of anything else because maybe somebody else that they've seen has it, or they saw a picture in a magazine. And so they talk about, let's just light the front of the house. And so when you go there and you talk to them, that's where their mind is. But then when you start suggesting maybe some of the architecture or some of the trees, what do you have in your backyard? Well, there's nothing. There's a patio, but we don't do anything back there. Well, why not? Right? So you light up the front, you give them the wow factor, but then they, and forgive this term, they turn into light junkies. Right? So your phone's always ringing for them, like, hey, Rick, I need more lights. I need more lights. And hey, we're having a party. Do you guys think you could do this and do that, do something for the backyard? Absolutely. So you transition from one end of a property, right? No matter how big it is, it's front to back. They're two different sides of the property, right? And what I tell folks is the front of the house is for everybody else. The back space is yours, right? That's where you're spending most of the time, on the deck, around the fire pit, around something. We can extend that. After the sun goes down, we can extend your outdoor life. And when you get the calls after you're done and the clients are just saying, we've spent all weekend out in our backyard, which we've never done, after the sun goes down. It's amazing. So those are the gratifying stories you hear all the time. Or, we never use our sconce lights anymore because the front of the house is lit. We can see the steps. We don't have to worry about tripping over steps, or our guests tripping over steps. So I get those stories every single day. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most fun parts of the business for me and I talk to my team and I say, we're creating spaces for family and friends to gather. We're not just remodeling a kitchen or remodeling a bath. We're creating a brand new space outside that gives them a place for Mother's Day and Father's Day and 4th of July and all those events. So we get real passionate about that. But a couple client stories really jump to mind. The short one, I had a client I did a huge job for early on in the business. A lot of fun, great couple. They had a son that was paraplegic, and I got to know them all really well. A few years later, they called me back, and they wanted to build this pool house. And I'm like, well, I don't do pool houses, and they wanted like this big glass room in the backyard. I'm like, I can't, I wish I could help you, I can't. And they said, oh, no problem. I get a call a few months later, nobody can help us. We want to do something. And so we started talking, and they'd bought this 18-foot long endless swimming pool for their son, for therapy for him. And they wanted a room built around this thing. And it ended up being complicated and step after step. And we built this really cool space for them. Comes off the house, gave them what they needed. And it was really cool. And again, great couple. The other one was another job I didn't want, actually, now that I think about it. This guy wanted a front porch, and it was all these features that we just don't do. You know, we'd never done them. And I was literally getting ready to craft a message to him saying, hey, listen, great guy, want to work with you. I can't do this. And I get a long email from him. It's going to be hard to tell this. He recently found out he's dying of cancer. And he wants to build this for his wife. Because she's been wanting it forever. How do you say no to that? So we did. It was great. And he did pass, former policeman. So you want to help all those first responders. So it's really powerful. And we've had other experiences like that. Like you said, there's tons of them. And you don't think you're affecting people's lives with, I'm building a deck. Okay, I do get passionate about what we're creating, but I don't think of it as that kind of situation. But wow, it's powerful when that happens,
So that's an unbelievable story. So thank you for sharing. And I'm gonna piggyback off of that because, and I don't think I've actually shared this story with anybody outside of my close circle, like my wife and my close friends, but like speaking to your point about serving the community, we pretty early on in our journey, we had the opportunity to go out for an estimate at just a relatively small roof, like not a crazy opportunity, but you get talking to the homeowner. It's this middle-aged woman who starts to share that her 9-year-old son was just diagnosed with leukemia, and like he just got back from treatments. They had to remove him from school, and he just finished his first or second round of chemo. And you could tell that they're really psychologically beaten down. And in that moment, you feel for them, and then you think, well, I finally put myself in a position where I can make the decision to help them. And so I said, I'll just put your roof on, no questions asked. And that stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, and when you get to the point in your business where you can afford to make those decisions, we've done a few of those things too, that feels so fulfilling too, right? Hey, we're going to help these people out because you can do it. You've built your business, you built that freedom, make those choices.
Yeah, and so that becomes really motivating to build something bigger, because the harder you work and the bigger you grow, the more people that you can impact like that. And so like you go through an experience like that and it teaches you like, hey, I want to be in a position to serve people like this for a long time. I want to go, give a free roof away to somebody else next year. So it's pretty cool to be in those positions.
Talked about family earlier, and I'm going to jump back to that because I think my family story is pretty fun. But what a lesson you're teaching your kids when you can do stuff like that. And that's one of the big things for me. My kids grew up in the business. They joke now about how they used to get paid a nickel to make prospect packets for me. And how come when their cousins worked, I paid them $10 an hour? I'm like, well, you were, different story. My kids drove logoed cars that got hand me down to school and would complain. I go, that's paying for college. You got to drive the vehicle. But they both worked in the business in high school and college every summer. My daughter loved doing permits. I can't understand that for the life of me. But my son, from about 10 years old, said, Dad, I want to do this. And I would come home and I'd make a sale and he'd go, wow, you got $40,000. And I go, well, understand, here's what's in that 40 grand. And of course, when he was little, and I'd go, and we're hoping we make 5 to 10% of it at the end. He'd like, what? Why would we do that? Well, from a young age, he's like, I want to be in the business. And I'd always say, go work somewhere else. You got to learn, but he'd work in the summer. Well, he graduated from college last spring. And a year before, he cornered me and he said, so I got a job next year. I said, no, dude, go work somewhere else. He's like, Dad, this is all I've ever wanted. Let me work with you. He started in June and he's killing it. And he loves it. He just told me it's the happiest he's ever been. It's really cool. Yeah, and my wife works with me every day too. I mean, it's a family affair for us, so it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, think about the ability to build a generational business. And we talk to a lot of folks that have goals, aspirations, and there's variability. I'm going to maximize the ability to create value. I'm going to divest. I'm going to invest in something, whatever that might be, that's next. We see folks that want to partner. They want a generational business with family, with staff. And the fun part is that with the right focus, with the right tolerance for risk, those are all achievable. I think what is perhaps the most impactful type of business ownership structure that I've seen has been the structure of a generational business where the son, the daughter, the grandson, the granddaughter wants to be in the business, like really wants to be in the business. You told your son, go work for someone else. And he said, no, I want to work for you. And it'll be his business one day, right? For sure. Maybe.
We'll see.
Right?
We'll see.
That's awesome. Let me ask a question. When you think about the journey of business ownership, there's a lot of success in this room. There are a lot of experiences in this room. What's been the hardest thing? And that might be, it was hard day one, week one, month one, week 5,433. But what's been the hardest thing?
For me, it was always regulating my own emotions. Because I used to, especially early on with the amount of work I was putting in, it was something's wrong, fight or flight, adrenaline's up, blood pressure's going up, gotta fix this immediately, you know, this just overwhelming feeling. And going back to what you had said earlier about your wife being, you know, also part of the business and a support structure, mine's the same way, but she's also always been my voice of reason and sounding board. And one day she said something that I should have known from the very beginning, but she was like, look, your job is to put out fires. If you're going to react like that every time, you're never going to make it. And like, it just, for some reason, I never thought of it that way. And once I kind of realized that, it was just like, oh, okay, all right. I'm able to, it was all kind of behind me. And now it's like a completely regulated thing with me. Like, oh, no big deal. We'll get it done. Nothing surprises me anymore, you know? So
the guidance will be later throughout the event. If anybody feels like they're losing their cool, call Clint.
Right.
We'll make sure that it's
Well, that sounds real familiar because I got that talk too.
yeah.
You know, and the hardest part, I guess, was picking my battles. And that's an important part in parenting and life in general, definitely in business, because I was challenged this year to really do that and to really, not let my emotions run so high, because the little things can drive you crazy. And so, but one of the hardest things is knowing mentally that every decision I make impacts everybody in the business. Everybody impacts my family, and that's a lot of weight to carry. To know that every decision you make can make you or break you in the long run, and everybody is counting on you.
Mm-hmm. How does that affect the way that you process that decision?
I try to have a 24-hour rule. And whether that's a reaction to something or, because it's easy as a business owner to think, I've got to fix this right now, especially as a guy. But having a 24-hour rule where it's like, hey, I'm not going to address this for 24 hours has been a game changer. Definitely.
I think it also helps to swallow your pride. Like, no matter who you are and how unprideful you think you are, like, it just to realize when, okay, like, I'm just kind of being prideful about this situation. I need to step back. This does have a lot of weight. Something as small as a bad review can really, really affect, the whole,
Ruin your whole day.
everybody. It's your whole day, but I mean, it can affect the whole business and, people in the business. And when you realize you have that much weight on your shoulders, it's a lot easier to swallow that pride, make the right decision, for the business and move forward.
Guys, what's been the hardest thing?
For me,
Rick's got a list.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how long we have? How long do we have? The hardest thing, for me professionally is what used to be when I first got into this business is with the guys that had to show up for work every day, and how do I keep those guys working, right? And that for me mentally, that was the hard part, right? And so as you build this business, you go to scale it, you ensure that you have the marketing spend, that you are getting enough calls or folks into your funnel, leads into your funnel to allow the guys to come to work every day, because those guys are relying on you to put food on their table, right? And that's mentally, that's the biggest or the hardest thing that I when starting out had to deal with is that, oh gosh, I got to keep these guys working, and that's my responsibility. So that, for me, that was it.
What I'm going through right now with where we're at in our business, we're growing, and to a point where I don't have enough time in the day to do everything that needs to get done to run the business. And so with that comes hiring, it comes delegating, it comes removing yourself from decisions that you're used to making. And I think I'm guessing that all of us have been through this, but it's really hard to let go when you put so much time and effort into your baby from day one. And it also requires it requires it's a process I haven't really been through in my life, but it requires a ridiculous amount of introspection, because you really have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to ask yourself, what am I good at? But most importantly, what are you not good at? And you have to be really honest with yourself about what you need to ruthlessly delegate to other people who are better than you at said thing. So I've been going through that battle for the last several months, just really coming to grips with there are certain areas of the business where there are definitely people who are massively better than me at this particular thing, and I need to put people in this position for the betterment of the business. But it's really hard to let go. It's really hard.
I like that term, ruthlessly delegate.
Yeah,
Ruthless.
that's where I'm at. Yeah.
I think what's hard changes as your business changes. I mean, year one, it's how hard can I work? Can I keep up with this? That my wife's one only rule she gave me at the end of year one is you've got to not work 1 day a week. 1 day a week, it's family. 6 days a week, do whatever you want. But so year one, it's that battle. But as you grow, it's different battles and different hardships. One of the things that really strikes me is, and this surprised me, it was hard to go, what's a job? How much work do I need to hire someone to do and keep them busy all day? And of course, it also depends on who you hire, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look around my office now and I see 5 people doing what one person used to do because our business has changed. And then the other part of that, and you use this phrase, and it really hit me, is you compromise. And one of the things I advise some of the younger franchisees I talk to, they'll talk about an employee who isn't perfect. They don't do everything right. Well, guess what? Nobody's perfect. And it's like, can you compromise? Can you help them build your business? And maybe they'll evolve and develop, but don't make good the enemy of great, and compromise on, boy, that drives me nuts, and go, but maybe that's okay for the next few years and grow in the business. And to me, those were the challenges, but they change as the business changes. Today I'm worried about hiring a higher level manager. And that's a big challenge. I've never had to go out and do that. Everybody's grown inside the company. And I'm like, we're at a point, someone just said it, where I know there's things I don't know beyond what I can just go learn from other people. I need to bring that asset in. Well, I've never had to do that. So that's a new challenge. That's a new hard.
Is it fair to say your business is never finished? Right? It's like that. It's like art, right? It's never done.
That's right.
You're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
You're constantly.
You have to be.
It changes every day.
Yeah.
It changes, and like they said this morning, it changes by the hour. It literally does. And if you're not willing to adapt, to pivot, and move into a different direction, you're gonna get passed up.
Let's close with this. I'd ask each of you to answer the question. I'll say it this way. I'd ask each of you to think about, if you could give one piece of advice, one nugget, to someone that's thinking about taking the step to control their destiny, own their own business, work for themselves, what would be that one piece of advice? In 27 parts.
Man, embrace what you decide to do, right? 100% embrace it, and you'll be successful.
I'm going to say it in a different way. Once you do decide to make that leap, burn the boats. Do not give yourself an out.
No going back.
Work as hard as you possibly can to make it, and just that it is what it is. You know, you have to make this successful. If you have that mentality, I don't think there's any way that you can fail, especially in a franchise proven system, you know?
The other side of that is that if you don't have that mentality, don't do it.
Yes.
And so my piece of advice would be to like have a really hard conversation with yourself and play out the worst case scenarios in your mind and really ask yourself, can I stomach that? Can I weather that? Can I survive that? And if the answer is no, it's probably not for you, because there's going to be a lot of crap thrown your way, and it is not for everybody.
I think all those are good, so I'll go at it from a different direction. And we talked a lot about family here. Make sure your spouse, your significant other, is in sync. I've watched entrepreneurs whose partner didn't support the effort it took or didn't support the decisions they had to make, and they just cannot be successful. And if that's the case, do something else, because you cannot be a business owner and not have that full support in the family. You won't succeed.
Great.
I think, a lot of it has to do with what you said. Think about what is the worst thing that can come out of this. And if you can live with that, then why not? Like we heard today, and I would say, a piece of advice from me would be, don't be afraid to fail, because failure will hold you in handcuffs forever. And if you looked at statistics, some of the most successful and wealthy people in the world, they did not succeed their first time out. They were not afraid of failing, and so they kept trying, and then they found what worked for them, and happily ever after.
Fail forward.
Failure is the pathway to success. You just have to walk down the whole path.
Exactly.
Right.
At 350 in the Major League Baseball, you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's
Yes.
right.
That's the way that
That's
works. I am incredibly grateful to each of you for spending time sharing your stories. As the guy here that hasn't owned a business, it is humbling to hear the work that you do, the stories that you have, the guidance that you've learned. So thank you, and I'm excited to see the result of this conversation and the great guidance that it gives to folks that are thinking about taking the step that each of you have taken. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having us.
guys. Thank y'all.